to ask you if we tie this back again and talk about this, the group that are trying to control this planet. Do you think that they are, in that sense, all powerful, or do you think that they actually wish that they were all powerful? And what we're witnessing right now is their attempts to control events on this planet, but in many cases it actually fails miserably because some of the things are so, well, actually stupid and so incredibly, again, it's some of these things that you brought up about 9/11. It's like, what is going on here? How can some of this stuff be so blatantly? These are mistakes, as I say it, in the geopolitical game, as it were. Or is there another even higher purpose to all this, meaning that this actually are the generators that bring people out from ignorance, so to speak, and into a higher form of awareness, meaning that when people begin to see and witnessing these anomalies, they're going to ask more questions, become more intelligent. Because of that, they're going to seek new answers to these questions. What do you think, Andy?
Well, I mean, I think your last point is definitely true, is that all the kind of anomalies which seem to have been left there in this trail from these elite powers, are actually raising a new consciousness. But whether that's the intention, I suspected it wasn't. And I think this is very important, is that there is a tendency in the conspiracy world to give these people, these elite groups that are believed to be there, too much power. And the fact is, if they were all powerful, they actually wouldn't need to be doing some of the things they're having to do now to control us, to persuade us into certain lines of thought. They clearly have not achieved their objective, or they wouldn't need to be trying anywhere near as hard as they are now. And I mean, there is a viewpoint that, we're not dealing with just one coherent group, but there may actually be factions within this elite group. And I mean, again, this offers some hope because, of course, if they are not entirely of one mind, then they are not going to be as strong as they would like to be. Now, perhaps this is what they're trying to achieve by creating the one world government scenario. They must believe that the more centralized it can be, the more then they will have a chance to fashion the world as they want. But I suspect that that's not where it's at yet. And that gives hope because it means they've still got a lot of work to do. And I believe they do make mistakes. And I believe that 9/11, as you said, is a case in point where I think it was such an audacious thing to try to pull off. They didn't think anybody would ever question it. And I think that may be where they've slipped up. Unless there's some utterly bizarre double bluff going on and that the creation of a truth campaign is in itself sort of part of their machinations, but personally I don't believe it is. If that's not the case, I think they just honestly believe nobody would question it. And I suspect that they are shocked by how many people have said, hang on a minute, this isn't right. And I think this is where there were sloppy errors on the day, little things that they didn't think they would ever have to explain, which are now being analyzed under the microscope, and people are saying, well, this doesn't make sense. This is, if you like, it's kind of like the emperor's new clothes movement. People are realizing, well, these things, they just don't make sense. And therefore, the people we're dealing with are not all powerful. The weapons of mass destruction thing, again, I almost get the feeling it was a slightly half-baked idea that nobody thought through too much about what would happen after it. Now, you could argue they got away with that because, sadly, we all voted back into power the very people that allowed that war in Iraq to occur. But nonetheless, I think the disillusionment felt by people in our leaders as a result of that war and the subsequent stuff that's carried on since, I think has undermined them. And I get the feeling they do make mistakes. They're not all powerful, and there are factions within who may be squabbling between themselves as to how this should be done. But as I say, maybe they're hoping that the nearer they can get to one world government, the nearer they will be to this state where there isn't so much squabbling between themselves. And certainly this is the belief of some, is that it's not as coherent as we're told. And again, I think we need to be very careful. We don't give them that much power.
Exactly.
If these people are trying to run the world, they are still people. They're still human beings. I mean, unless you subscribe to the view that they are extraterrestrial reptilians, which some people believe, and that may be true, it may not be true, but essentially, I suspect we're dealing with people. And people are flawed, people make mistakes, and they're the same as us. And we were talking earlier on about the collective consciousness. Now, the thing is, the collective consciousness theory says that all our minds are linked. Now, on one hand, you could argue that's a bad thing because it means our minds are then linked to the realms of the darker powers that be, and I think they're much more aware of the collective process than the general populace is, and I think they use it to spread darkness and fear through the collective like a domino effect.
Yes.
But on the other hand, the plus side of that, and I urge people to go and look up the Global Consciousness Project and books like The Field by Lynn McTaggart and all of these things. I mean, we're talking early days for the science of consciousness, but the indications are that when lots of people focus their thoughts on the same thing at the same time, but particularly with very specific intent, and that seems to make a huge difference, this is changing the world. It's creating recordable ripples of, let's call it some energetic process that we don't fully understand. Now that means that when enough people out here, outside of the elite groups, change their thoughts, change their lives, change the way they are, that must ripple back and affect the very elite that we're talking about here. So in other words, they are not immune to the way we live our lives. And that offers massive hope. And I do think we need to very much come out of this view that what we're dealing with is a done deal, that there are evil powers that have just about nearly sewn up, their agenda. Well, yes, I think they're further forward than they have been. But I also think there's so much awareness now that what's going on in the world isn't right, even by people that wouldn't see it in conspiratorial realms and see it in very real-world terms. Nonetheless, I do think that people are standing up to be counted and trying to make a difference in a way that the elite groups did not anticipate. Now, this is where it comes down to the way we react. We touched on this earlier on. It may be that they're trying on one level to get some kind of mob rule going. I mean, you get the feeling that with the G20 protest a few weeks ago in London that they were hoping for more riots.
Yes.
But it actually didn't happen. I mean, most of the trouble we saw was generally quite small and very isolated. And in fact, what's come out of that is more a concentration on the police brutality rather than the actions of the people. And you do have to wonder, well, maybe, again, this was not what they anticipated. Now, there will be people listening to this will say, no, that's a double bluff. What they're trying to do is give police more powers. Now, of course, that might be true. But equally, in the collective, what it does is send round the view, well, actually, people are better than we're given credit for.
Yes.
And certainly the media in the days before G20 almost seemed to be encouraging rioting.
Yep.
It was almost kind of giving you the feeling that they wanted people to take to the streets. And although people did, most of those people were peaceful, sensible. They were not smashing in bank windows. That was a very, very few people. And even there, of course, there's been the accusations of Asian provocateurs, which of course does happen in riots and things like this. But what's come out of it is, in fact, images of the police abusing people. So it's perhaps not what even they were anticipating. And I think this is very important, that people are good on the whole. You get, obviously, people who are not so good, but we get fed a vision through the news that there's a lot of violence, that people are bad, and that, we're in a world we should fear. Well, there are places like that, but on the whole, the average human being just wants to live their own life peacefully and get on with people and make other people's lives better. And, I mean, it's interesting, when we had the snow a few months ago, I was driving back from London with my partner, and we got stuck in the snow. And this was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and yet there were people coming out of their houses to help push cars up the hills in the snow. They were getting nothing out of it. They could have all stayed indoors, but they did, because there is still a human spirit which is very strong, which basically works for the collective good. Now, if there's an elite out there thinking that they can override that, I think they may be shocked by the power of those who want a more positive world. And maybe they anticipated too much that we would all just cave into darkness, and maybe we're not behaving the way they expected. And I think we should always consider that these people are not all powerful. You can believe in conspiracy theories, and that is fine where there is evidence, but we must not give these people that we are anticipating exist too much power, because I think that gives them the very power they want. It is the people that carry the real power, and I think that these are the years we're now moving into, as I say, where it's time to actually step into that and get a whole new rebalancing of where the real responsibility for society lies and who really calls the shots. And I absolutely do not think it is a done deal.
Very, very good points, all of them, I think, Andy. And do you think that the system that we're having currently now then is simply needs to be reformed and good people need to be put in place, or do you think that the system we have needs to be actually kind of, demolished or eradicated, and a new system at the side will be built up with which has morality and ethics as its foundation? Any ideas?
Well, I mean, one thing that I would never advocate is this kind of smash the system way of thinking, because it never works. If you look at historical revolutions where people have tried to replace a system with something completely new, it always winds up essentially falling into the same pitfalls. We have the makings of something that could be a democratic process in this country if you took out of it the intrigues and the corruptions and the deceptions. It's not a perfect system, but it is a system that certainly has worked better than many others over the years. I think we need to look at the attitudes behind it, and I think we need to look very, very carefully at the corruption that goes on.
Yes.
I mean, just recently in England, we've had all this exposure about MPs claiming for expenses that they just shouldn't be claiming for. Nobody can respect that. Just a few months before that, we had Lords in the House of Lords effectively taking bribes to lobby for certain things. This cannot be allowed to go on. Now, the unfortunate thing is that no consequences were brought down on these people, and it sent out the signal to certainly the population of England that these people can just do what the hell they like, and there's no comeback. And this is the problem, is that I think nobody can respect that, and sooner or later that system will crumble. So if it actually was run without these scenes of dishonesty, and these are issues that we all have to deal with within ourselves, not just project outwards. But if we could all actually look at the way we live our lives and apply that to the systems that govern us, I think there could be something different. And I mean, if you look at even the way that English Parliament is set up, I mean, even King Arthur knew that the best decisions were made in the round and a round table, but we're stuck with a system with a House of Commons where you've got two benches facing each other. And then the distance between the two benches was originally set up so that they were precisely 2 swords lengths and a bit to prevent conflict breaking out. So in other words, the decisions are being made in a very chamber that anticipated conflict and did not, was not set up to encourage cooperation. And so I think we need to look at just everything from even the design of the places these decisions are made in, to the kind of people that are there and the systems that govern them. But all the time you've got corruption, particularly to do with expenses and things like this. You don't even need conspiracy theory to come into the picture. You're looking at a system that cannot function properly. And what we're going to need, as I say, is a philosophical revolution where people put the greater good before their own needs. And that certainly is not what is occurring at the moment. And that's the problem, is that, okay, even if you got rid of the Illuminati tomorrow, even if you exposed them all and stopped them, human nature is still such that you will always get people gathering into little groups of power.
Yes.
And I think the only way around that, without going into the communist realms, is to have a much